two, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check. All right. Check 2, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check. Imali leyo. Two, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check. Checking 1, 2, checking 1, 2, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. Le yakho? Ufuna ukutesta yakho? Oh, okay. Ukuthi yakho ineplate ke la ngaphansi manje. Ayisondeli kahle. Imangcimele na. 2, check, 1, 2. Uyayithola yakho? Yeah, it's soft. 2, 2, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, check. Mike phuma ngalena 2 kwi-main cam nakhona izoba soft. See right manje. Uyangizwa sengi away from the mic. All right.
Oh, la fan. Oh, thanks. All right.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome at Simbali. Just a quick brief of the facility. In the event of an emergency, you've got 3 fire escapes on your right-hand side. Exit the door, the assembly area is at the circle. If the emergency is on your right-hand side, there's 3 emergency exits on your left-hand side. Just exit, follow the signs in a single file, the assembly points on the outside. Then restrooms, if you exit the doors to your right, there's males and females. If you exit to the left, there's males and females close to the reception where you entered. When using the facility, be mindful of the wildlife on the premises. We've got monkeys, we've got small buck, and then the occasional snake that slithers around. The beaches aren't swimming beaches. Take note that you cannot swim because of the sandbanks that constantly change. If you're going to be here for the whole week, so when you leave your room, please ensure that all windows and sliding doors are closed. The monkeys do get over the building and enter the room. You might end up with a suitcase that all your stuff is outside, your sugar or any treats might be taken. If there's any questions, please feel free to go to reception or dial on your phone, and the team will be there to assist in any manner. Thank you.
Two, check 1, 2.
Good morning, colleagues. Can we please be ready to start with the program? First of all, we do apologize for starting a little bit late. It looks like the colleagues are still coming. In the meantime, we shall start with the program. So, colleagues, just a small reminder about the app. Please make sure you downloaded the app because we are going to be sending instant messages on the app, and then you can also personalize it to have the sessions that you want to attend personalized and on your program. So please, let's make sure that we download the app. And if we can appeal to the colleagues to make sure that we are on time so that the program starts on time. So we'll be commencing with the program now by a welcome address by Dr. Makua, who's the conference chair and the acting DVC teaching and learning at MUT. Doc, please come through.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is this on? Yes. Doesn't sound on. Yes, this is on. Is it on? Okay. Switch this off then. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to welcome you to Focus Conference 2023. I'm not going to say a lot. You'll be seeing a lot of me say tomorrow in the morning, but I would like just to briefly appreciate everyone who has managed to make it to the conference today. We are really delighted to have you here this morning. A special welcome to Professor Chrissy Bowie, who is our keynote speaker this morning. Thank you, Prof, for making it to Durban, and I am sure that you have already started experiencing the warmth of the people around here. We guarantee you an experience second to none, that you will live here and market us very well out there. And thanks to colleagues who come from other institutions. As the day progresses, I'm sure that we will acknowledge all the universities, both public and private, who are here today. And I welcome my MUT colleagues who are here. Thank you, colleagues, for always making yourself available for this conference. We indeed have lined up a great conference experience between today and Friday. The workshop started on Monday, and I've been told that all the workshops have gone on very well, and people are very appreciative of the experience that they've been given. So thank you so much, colleagues. You will know that just before COVID-19, we were supposed to come here. I'm not sure, it was in 2020, and it was all systems go. And COVID happened, and we had to postpone the conference. But we are now here, and it's happening, and it's going to be a great experience. So the conference is officially open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc, for the introduction. I think, colleagues, we are now free to move and roam around now that you have been welcomed to the 2023 Focus Conference. Colleagues, we are now going to have a keynote address from Prof. Bowie, who's an emeritus professor and worked in leadership positions for a couple of years. So we will be hearing from her wisdom and expertise in terms of some of the issues that are pertinent to higher education in this regard. Prof. Bowie was a Dean of Teaching and Learning at Rhodes, a position she held until she retired in 2019. She's now a full professor, a research professor in the Center for Postgraduate Studies at Rhodes, and also holds a position as a professor extraordinaire at the Center for Adult and Higher Education at the University of Stellenbosch. Spanning throughout the years, her research draws on critical theory in pursuit of social justice, and she co-authored with colleagues such as Professor McKenna on their seminal work titled Understanding Higher Education, Alternative Perspective. The book is available on open access as well. She is currently writing another book focused on the use of theory in the field of educational development, a 2002 publication entitled Not There Yet, Knowledge Building in Education Development 10 Years On, in the International Journal in Teaching and Learning. Prof. Bowie serves on the editorial boards of several international journals, including Teaching and Learning in Higher Education and the International Journal of Academic Development and Arts and Humanities in Higher Education. She is also an associate editor at the South African Journal of Sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give a welcome for Prof. Chris Bowie. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. That's all I can say. So I'm very, very pleased to be here, and I have indeed had a very warm welcome. So thank you. So this morning I'm going to talk about SGD Goal 4 and South African higher education. And what I'm going to be doing is drawing on the latest vein of work that I've been pursuing for a number of years now. It started off when Shireen Matala, who is the Saatchi Chair of Teaching and Learning at the University of Johannesburg, asked me to write something about the structure and nature of the research field in teaching and learning in South Africa. So I did that, and I found it very interesting. I found out all sorts of things. And then I went on and wrote another paper, and I'm now writing yet another paper, which I hope will be out in alternation quite soon. But I'll be drawing on that work, but trying to focus it for this conference. So let's see where I get to. Okay, so the way I see it is that in the context of this conference, SGD Goal 4 is about equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality higher education. And it's also about the role of academic teachers, teaching and learning specialists, that is people like us, in achieving that goal. And I want to focus on us, on the academic teachers, the teaching and learning specialists, as I talk. I don't think we've been doing very well. If you look at all the cohort analyses that come out every year, the CHE Vital Stats, for example, what you can see is that although our higher education system has massified and access has improved, we're still not a really big system, incidentally. We're not, in terms of participation, our participation rate, 18 to 24-year-olds, it only just qualifies us as a massified higher education system, just over 20% of the cohort. Places like the United States and so on, they're 50%. So we still have a very small proportion of young people going to university in this country when you view it as a cohort, even though the system has doubled in size since the early 1990s. So although we've grown, and although more people are now in the universities, what's quite astonishing, and we can't shift this, is that regardless of the institution at which they're registered, the qualification for which they're enrolled, and the field of study, black students consistently do less well than their white peers. Now, we've really got to ask some critical questions about why that is the case, particularly given the efforts of people like us, really devoted, earnest efforts to try to change the situation. So my talk this morning is about can we really say we're addressing equity and equality? I don't think we can. And if we aren't, what's going wrong? And I'm going to come into the what's going wrong from the perspective of the kind of knowledge we use to understand students' learning experiences and the problems they face. So my focus is on the kind of knowledge we, people like us, use to understand learning experiences and the problems. But I'm going to begin by talking about two dominant discourses shaping the teaching and learning arena. And I don't think this is only in South Africa, I think this is global. And I've termed them efficiency discourses and equity discourses. So discourse is very much a social science term, and I know many of people here are mathematicians and natural scientists and engineers and so on. So I'll just explain what it is. So a discourse is a set of ideas that hang together in language and other sign systems. So if you look at my diagram, each of those different colored bubbles could represent an idea. And those ideas they're loose, but they hang together. Some are more important than others, but they basically hang together. A discourse isn't stable. An idea can float off, and it can come back again. But it's basically a set of ideas that hang together. And what's important about discourses is they're all around us, every day, all day. And they have the power to make us think, believe, value, understand, and act in particular ways. They normalize the world for us. And so what happens is that we then start thinking, believing, and acting in particular ways in relation to that world. So I'm going to begin by talking about these efficiency discourses, which I've said dominate teaching and learning across the world. And they draw on neoliberalism. So neoliberalism, what's that? Well, neoliberalism privileged the idea of the market. The market as in the market we all know, buying and selling things. And what it does is it says, well, knowledge is a commodity, just the way iron or steel or platinum or gold is a commodity. Knowledge is a commodity, and you can buy it and sell it. You can trade it. Once you start having that idea about knowledge as a commodity that can be bought and sold, you start to see education as a private good. Because if you've got knowledge, you can go and sell it. You can sell it to an employer. And what that then does is it reduces the role of higher education to that of a provider of knowledge workers for a global economy. So it's about the whole focus about higher education for jobs. What you have to remember, though, is that in our white paper, the 1997 white paper, 4 purposes for higher education were identified. One purpose is meeting the learning aspirations of individuals throughout their lives. Another purpose is producing a creative and critical citizenry. Remember, we're a new democracy. You want critical citizens. A third purpose is producing knowledge. just for the sake of knowledge, blue skies knowledge, philosophy, knowledge about literature, and so on, that doesn't have a commercial benefit necessarily. And the final purpose is producing workers for the global economy, contributing to economic development. But what's happened because of these dominance, the dominance of these efficiency discourses, is that fourth purpose of higher education being about producing workers, about employment, it's come to cloud all else, and we forget the other purposes. Another thing that happens once you start thinking in this way is that the state can argue for reduced spending. Because a degree is going to benefit the graduate. The graduate, is, if you like, is going to be able to go and sell that knowledge, certified in the degree, on the open market. So therefore, why should the state support that graduate? So what you then see is the funding for higher education from the state going down. And that's what's happened over the years in South Africa. And remember, we had the protests about student tuition fees, and we continue to have them every year. And the other thing that these efficiency discourses do is they promote the use of incentives. And our big incentive, of course, is the funding formula, isn't it? The more efficient we are as universities, the more money we can get from the state. But that's not all to efficiency discourses. They see higher education as a meritocracy. And so what does that mean? Well, basically, if you understand higher education as a meritocracy, you say that access and success are open to all, every person who has the abilities to succeed. And those abilities are generally considered to be things like intelligence, aptitude, and motivation. So provided you've got those abilities, you can come to university and you can succeed. But in order to make that argument, what you then have to say is that the forms of knowledge and ways of knowing that underpin higher education are themselves neutral. That what we offer as knowledge, it's just neutral. Anybody can learn it. Anybody can have this knowledge, provided you've got those abilities like intelligence, aptitude, and motivation. And for the people who don't have those abilities, well, tough, you fail, or tough, you can't come here. And I'm sure many of you are already thinking that in many institutions, and it can just be casual chat over the latest set of marks in a departmental tea room. The dominant idea is that the students who fail have failed because they don't have what it takes. And the big one that's often mentioned is motivation. The other thing that's also mentioned often is the school system, the failing school system. But that comes to my final bullet on that screen, which is that the forms of knowledge and ways of knowing are the same. They're neutral. They're open to everybody. School knowledge isn't the same as knowledge in the universities. It's different. And we know a lot about those differences nowadays. So you've got to start discounting that idea that the problems lie in the school system. The final thing about efficiency discourses is that they privilege managerialism and the metrification of results, efforts, and outputs. Bean counting. What's your throughput rate? What's your success rate in this course? How many research outputs have you produced? You're all very familiar with that. And what they also do is they put pressure on you, on the academic teachers and the teaching and learning specialists. And it's saying, you have the power to make a difference. You, by improving your teaching, you can improve the success rate, the graduation rate, the throughput rate. You people in the teaching and learning center, well, you've got a really important role because you've got to help the university improve its efficiency. So they place the responsibility for improving things on individuals. And what happens then is the university, the structure of the university, gets off scot-free. It's not implicated in any of this. In contrast, what I've called equity discourses, remember those sets of ideas, they see the university as a social construct. People made universities. They didn't just come into being. People made them and continue to make them and remake them on a daily basis. And what these social spaces of the universities do is they privilege some at the expense of others. I'm not sure if you know this, but global data, global, that's wherever, America, Europe, Australia, wherever, global data shows that the young people who are most likely to gain access to and succeed in a university are the children of educated caregivers. Your children will have more chances of accessing and gaining success in a university than others because you're educated. And the things that go on in the home, the way you talk, the fact that there are books, the fact that your children will see you writing, and so on, all those things we know contribute to developing a young child and preparing them for school. And then as they're in school, that home extends their learning in school. If you ask your child, what did you do in school today? You're extending their learning. If you ask them, have you got any homework? Let me see it. You're extending their learning. But that doesn't happen in all homes. Think of how many homes there are no books and where caregivers don't read printed text. Their preference is for oracy. Okay, so universities privilege some at the expense of others. And the role of the curriculum is really important. And what the equity discourses do is they say the curriculum is a device that regulates access to knowledge. The way the curriculum is designed, the way it's put together, the very curriculum decides who gets to succeed and not. Right? So the curriculum isn't a neutral thing of what is taught, how teaching takes place, how students are assessed, and so on and so on. No, it's seen as political. It's seen as a device, a mechanism that regulates access to knowledge and therefore who can succeed or who fails. And the other important thing about equity discourses is that they privilege the critical interrogation. And I'm using the word critical there to mean from a perspective in social justice, where you're saying, well, why are some students doing better than others? Why? And you're not simply blaming the school system, or you're not simply saying, oh, well, they lack the motivation, they don't do any work, they never read any books. You're looking more deeply than that at what goes on in the universities and asking how teaching approaches, assessment, and so on, all contribute to some doing better than others. So basically, equity discourses say education isn't fair. It's not fair. Some people have got a head start. And that if you want to be a critical educator, then you have to start working at making it more fair. Now, the problem with academic life, you know, you're in a job in a university, and the nature of discourse, remember those ideas, they're around us all day, and they normalize things for us. It's normal to talk about students lacking motivation. It's normal to talk about students lacking aptitude, and so on and so on. It's not normal to think about the curriculum as something that decides who passes and who fails. So academic life and the very nature of discourse means that it can be difficult for those of us who are in it all day, every day, to get a helicopter view of the ideas swirling around us. And that's why I've spent time this morning mapping out those two sets of discourses. It's also very difficult to see how those discourses are shaping our thinking and our actions as teachers and teaching and learning specialists. So if you can go away with anything today from my talk, I hope it will be around an understanding of discourse and the idea that they normalize what you believe. And so when you next start making an assumption about something, you'll just pause for a minute and think, where does that come from? Where does that come from? If we look at the teaching and learning field, historically, those who've been interested in teaching and learning have always been concerned with equity. However, what you can also see is that from the late 1990s onwards, the field was shifted towards a concern for institutional and system level efficiency. So what we got from the mid-90s onwards was a whole lot of structural reforms. The NQF, program accreditation. Early 2000s, we got the mergers, the restructuring of the higher education system. Universities had to work out what it meant to be a comprehensive, a traditional, or a UOT. Okay, we had those structural reforms. And we also, of course, got the incentivized funding formula. And universities want that money. And then from 2007 onwards, Scott, Yeld, and Henry produced the first one. We started to get those analyses of student throughput, graduation, and attrition rates. So once we got those structural reforms, we needed people to work with the NQF, with program accreditation, with all that stuff that the CHE requires. We needed people to try to maximize the money that universities can earn through the funding formula. And then from 2007, we got, we've got this problem because the throughput, graduation, and attrition rates are terrible. So what you then start to see is a field which was always interested in equity has been reconstructed within a concern for efficiency. And what I'm saying is you have to be very careful not to be taken up with those efficiency discourses, captured by them. We know about state capture. Well, you can get intellectual capture as well through discourse. And that you don't succumb to these ideas without turning back and saying, hang on, what is this? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my students? So what can we do? What can we do as academic teachers, teaching and learning specialists? Well, I'm going to go back to what I think is a really important paper written by Shea, and she calls for the use of knowledge that can reconceptualize problems. So what I'm trying to argue is that these discourses around us, most especially the efficiency discourses, they push us into identifying problems and understanding them in particular ways. Okay? The fact that the success rates are appalling is because students come from bad schools, or students lack aptitude for this subject, or students don't have the motivation. Sue Ellen Shea is calling for the kind use of knowledge that will allow us to see the problem differently. She's also very critical of the kind of knowledge that we use in the field. She calls it educational development, academic development. Let's call it teaching and learning. So she says that the kind of knowledge that we use, which she calls codified practice, isn't strong enough to allow us to reconceptualize problems. So what is this thing she calls codified practice? So it begins with the idea of context-dependent knowledge, Bernstein's horizontal discourse. So let me just explain a bit here. Bernstein identifies two ways of understanding the world around us. One way, which he calls horizontal discourse, context-dependent knowledge, we all do it from birth. It's a way of understanding the world based on our experience. It's experiential knowledge, okay? So I was talking to someone this morning about rain, and I said, oh, well, in KZN, the rain usually comes in the summer. I used to live in KZN because I was at the University of Zululand for 5 years. So I was drawing on my experiential knowledge to make that statement, the rain always comes in summer. But if you think about that statement, it's only true for KZN. It's not true for the West Coast. I left Cape Town yesterday and there were floods. So in Cape Town, on the western coast, the rain comes in the winter. So that experiential knowledge, it only allows you to make sense of the world in a particular context, in a particular time and space. Who knows what's going to happen to rainfall once we have climate change? It's already changing. So that's what Bernstein calls horizontal discourse. There's another kind of knowledge, though, and this is the kind of knowledge the schools and the university deal in. Bernstein calls it vertical discourse. And that's systematized, theorized knowledge that will allow you to make sense of something anywhere in the world, now and in the future, or equally in the past. And an example of that might be the rain cycle. Do you remember the rain cycle at school? The teachers told us the sun shines on the ocean, the water in the ocean heats up, the water evaporates, the water vapor rises and forms clouds, the clouds move in over the land. Once they move over the land, they fall, and at that point the vapor condenses and falls as rainfall. The rain falls on the land, into the rivers, and flows back to the sea. So there you go. We've got that rain cycle. I'm pretty sure every single person in this room learned that at school. It's a theorized, abstract account. You can't see evaporation. You can't see condensation. You can't see the rain cycle. If you look out at the sea today, you can't see it. It's abstract, theorized, systematized. But that kind of knowledge will allow us to make sense of rainfall anywhere in the world. And that's the stuff of the universities. That's what we teach in the universities. And it's called powerful knowledge for the very fact that it will allow us to make sense of things wherever we are now, into the future, as well as in the past. But what Shay is saying is that in the teaching and learning field, we're drawing on that first kind of knowledge. The rain usually falls in the summer. That horizontal discourse, the context-dependent knowledge. And I was talking about the role of discourse in producing that kind of knowledge. So, it's obvious students fail because they lack motivation, or they're not intelligent enough, or because they don't read, or because the schools are bad. Okay? So what Shay says is that a lot of the knowledge we use begins with that context-dependent knowledge. But what we then do is we try to draw principles out of this everyday common sense of seeing the world. A set of principles, a set of steps. Do this, do that, do the other. And we then apply that to the problems. So, one sort of principle might be, you've got to get students involved in their learning. They've got to become active learners. Okay? So then you get a set of steps. What can you do to make them active learners? Okay, group work is a good one. So let's put them into groups. You've got to give them a task, and then you've got to walk around the groups, and then you've got to make sure that and you get this codified practice. Okay? So Shay is saying that's what we're relying on. But because the practice develops from this common sense, experiential way of seeing the world, it won't allow us to reconceptualize the fact that students are sitting there passively. Why are they sitting there passively? right? No, we just quickly work at trying to make them active. So what's the alternative? Well, it's drawing on systematized, theorized accounts. I gave you the example of the rain cycle as lenses to see the world differently. And as we see differently, we reconceptualize problems and find different solutions. Now, Shay uses the example of assessment. And her example of codified practice is that whole constructive alignment that we're all very familiar with. You know the story. You've got learning outcomes. You develop associated assessment criteria. And then from there, you go on to develop tasks which will allow you to see the criteria as in operation. So a step-by-step account of assessment. And many of us have been teaching this from the late 1990s onwards because of the whole OBE thing that came in with the NQF and the need to accredit programs and re-register programs on the NQF and later the HEQSF. Okay? It's a step-by-step, it's procedural, it's codified. Okay? Shay can show you that using strong, powerful, abstract, theorized knowledge, that assessment doesn't actually work like that. It doesn't work like that. In her example, she uses Bourdieu, a French sociologist, and she uses it to problematize assessment. So she went in with Bourdieu, like my glasses, okay? I'm not wearing my glasses now, and you're all pretty blurry. When I put my glasses on, I see you differently. I can see your faces, okay? So she used Bourdieu as a theory that allowed her to see assessment. And she started to show that it's, in fact, a very messy business, and all sorts of social, cultural, political stuff comes into it. So it's not this neat. First you do this, then you do that, and then you do the other. Ooh, there's a whole lot of stuff in there that you don't see unless you put those knowledge spectacles on. And there's lots of other examples of the way we can use powerful knowledge, these systematized, theorized accounts, to see students' experiences differently. But not all theorized accounts are equal, okay? I'm drawing on the work now of Paul Ashwin, who critiques approaches that underplay the importance of student-teacher identities and power relations in teaching and learning. This means that academic students and their institutional contexts cease to have a history, and the explanatory framework is ahistorical. So what Ashwin is saying is you need to start using theory that will make that will make sense of the fact that universities are these politically contested spaces. Our students come in, they want the knowledge because they want to be able to go out into the world and get jobs and earn money and support families and all that sort of stuff. So they've got those ambitions, those desires, all right? That's their interest, their concern. But the university comes back and the disciplines come back and we say, well no, the knowledge is like this. And what often happens is that the students come in and they're only familiar with these experiential views of the world, like it always rains in the summer, doesn't it? And the abstract, theorized accounts of the world are alien to them. So you've got to understand the power relations there. The university is pushing one kind of knowledge, the students want other things, and what you start to then see are these clashes and all sorts of things. And it's about identity. A graduate is a person who can use this theorized knowledge, but our students aren't that person when they come in, and you have to start then understanding that they have to change at a fairly fundamental level. They're different people, and that's hard as they progress through a program. So Ashwin is saying you can't use these soft approaches. You've got to get in and use the strong critical approaches that understand that the university is a political, social, cultural, contested space. So the call then is for theory that doesn't draw on what goes on in individual minds, not those psychologized accounts. It calls for theory that doesn't explain a pedagogical approach. Okay? So a pedagogical I don't know, active learning or whatever. A pedagogical approach. It's got a theory behind it. No. Ashwin is saying that's not what we want. Rather, we need theory that sees knowledge and learning as taking multiple forms. And the fact that the university privileges a particular form of knowledge and way of learning. And that's alien to our students, to the majority of our students, apart from those who've been lucky enough to be born into these homes, where there've been people in the home who've been able to introduce it to them from birth, really. So we need a theory which will understand the multiplicity of knowledge forms, and which therefore will explain the social, the cultural, and the political dynamics of teaching and learning. Hold those words, social, political, and cultural dynamics of teaching and learning. So in conclusion, what I'm arguing is that we need theory that sees classrooms, courses, and programs as sites of socio-cultural politics, where different groups lobby for access to the goods of the world. And in this case, goods is knowledge, because knowledge gets you a job, and so on. Only if we draw on this powerful theory, I'm arguing, will we be able to understand South African performance data and the lack of transformation in our system. But, and I'm going to go back to the beginning now, I'm also arguing that dominant efficiency discourses work against our use of this theory. Those efficiency discourses normalize us into seeing the world in particular ways. And my plea is that as teaching and learning specialists, as academic teachers, we pause, we stop, we ask ourselves, as I said earlier, hang on, where does that come from? Is there another way of understanding what I'm seeing before me? So there's some references I've drawn on, but basically that's the end. Thank you. I hope it's been useful. I'm very happy to take any questions if there's time.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your keynote address. Colleagues will be taking a few questions to engage with Prof's presentation. But before we do that, we would like to give an opportunity to Dr. Magua to respond to the keynote address. Doc.
Well, maybe not responding per se, Prof. I'll just raise one issue and then give you the chance to take the questions. What do you think about the fact that 24 years after democracy and the many amended higher education acts that we've gone through, white papers, policy documents, etc., what do you think that even at this time where we are now, we're still talking about equity issues? I mean, where is it taking us? What do you think, where are the bottlenecks? What are the issues? What is constraining the system from reaching a point where we can easily begin to say things are settling in and we are beginning to solve the many problems that we saw several decades ago? but we're still dealing with teething problems as far as equity issues and transformation issues are concerned within the system. And then I'll let you go.
The way I see it is if you go back to the late 1980s, 1990s, and there are analyses of this, you can see that policy formation was always contested, and that from the beginning, South Africa had to deal with the need for equity, huge equity backlogs. But at the same time, suddenly, we were being invited to join the global economy, which had moved on while we'd been sitting on the sidelines. So from the late 80s, we had these two needs, the need for equity and the need for efficiency to join the global economy. And you can see those two needs playing out in different policies. And if you're interested in looking at that, I'd recommend Andre Krach's work. There's a book published by the HSRC called Education in Retrospect. It's an old book, but it's very useful. So you can see the way those two needs clashed as policymakers got working. I think, over time, what's happened is that the efficiency discourses have trumped. They're the ones that have come to dominate the equity discourses. And that equity discourses are symbolic. So our policies are saying, yes, 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 of course, of course, of course, of course, of course. But what I described as those efficiency discourses, they're the dominant ones. And they're constructing our students' experiences in particular ways. And it's our job to go back and challenge that construction. So that's my take on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for an inspiring presentation. The question I have is, how do I, as an individual lecturer in that class or in that lecture room, navigates the system that is underpinned by efficiency discourse to try an alternative? Because this head of department is looking for marks, and this head of department is saying the students cannot fail like this, etc., etc. So there's this pressure on me to comply to the system. At the same time, I want to be an activist, change the system into the right direction. So I'm doing what I don't want to do, but the system in which I'm operating forces me to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So, of course, if a student fails, it's a blow for equity, isn't it? For equity. If a student passes, we're going to move towards greater equity. So you want the students to pass. And of course the HOD then in that case is right, saying you've got to improve the success rates. So yeah, that's okay. But I would argue that what you have to do as someone, as an activist, you have to challenge the way students' problems are conceptualized, the way success and failure are conceptualized. You have to do it in the tea room when people start talking about intelligence, aptitude, motivation. I mean, you know, if you take that performance data to its logical conclusion, and you see that persistently black students do less well than their white peers, what are you saying if you start blaming it on a lack of intelligence, aptitude, and motivation? What are you saying? Are you saying they're deficient in some way? That takes us right back to apartheid thinking. But those discourses are so strong, we don't take that thought to its logical conclusion and say, hang on, and challenge when people start talking about the reasons for the problem in those ways. When people start talking about the school system, you could say, well, hang on, you know, in Britain, which has a well-established school system, works much better than ours, still working class, marginalized groups don't get into the universities. The people who get into the universities are the middle classes, right? And now there's all sorts of moves in Britain to make places like Oxford and Cambridge open up to marginalized groups. They're doing what we did 24 years ago. So if they've got a good school system and they've still got this problem, isn't there something wrong with the way you're seeing the problem as lying in the school system? So what I'm trying to argue is that if you want to be this activist educator, you have to start questioning the common sense assumptions. And in your own work, in your own research in teaching and learning, you have to bring in these powerful theories which will allow us to see teaching and learning differently, to see our students' experiences differently. But I think the challenges along wherever you are, if you're talking to a colleague in a car on the way home and they start saying, hang on, have you really thought about that? That's what I would see as activism against these dominant discourses.
Good morning. Prof, I don't know if it's a comment or a question. To me, your presentation is more sensitive, and it requires an individual to think thoroughly. Did I say number one? Okay, number one. Professor, you are saying that we should stop having to stop thinking about our educational system. Today, this morning, I was listening to the news. There's a shortage in terms of, what is this? Auditors. Do you know one of the main reasons? Is because the government changed the system, introducing the mathematical literacy, which when you have a mathematical literacy, is going to be difficult for you to become an auditor. We want pure maths. You are speaking of black and white students doing better, white students doing better. It's not really an assumption, Professor, it's a fact. In a black high school, you have 66 students in one class. In a white school, you have 22 in one class. That should also be seen as a problem. Our educational system, yes, you are right, we cannot continue to blame it, but I blame it. Prof, whether we like it or not, the traditionally black universities, there's still a serious problem compared to white universities. And we are not addressing that. We should not forget that. Now, Prof, whenever we introduce the element of black and white, automatically there's no equity. We cancel the concept of equity. It doesn't exist. Forget about it, put it away. If we are still seeing each other as black and white, let's stop the conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think you've made a really important point. Let me just go back to the school system. The school system obviously is hugely problematic. But what we know, and there's a lot of research for this, on this, is that schools deal in a different kind of knowledge to what the universities deal in. At schools, it's often about here's the knowledge, you've got to learn it, you've got to repeat it. Now, that will be different in different schools and with different teachers. But overwhelmingly, analyses, for example, Geisler's analysis of all the reading and writing tasks that go on in schools, they show that that is the case. But once you come to university, what students are required to do is different. It's different. And it also plays out in the whole fact, you know, that they're suddenly required to be these independent learners rather than being moved around from class to class. So yes, some schools are better than others. I wouldn't dispute that. But I still think that you have to look at the way the university itself functions to exclude some and to privilege others through teaching and learning. Because you can't assume that the school prepares students for the university. I went to a good school. I didn't know what earth was going on in my undergraduate degree. I graduated and I didn't know what was going on. Somebody told me years later, I did my first degree in English literature. Somebody told me years later that I'd been taught to use a broad Lewisian framework to read literature. My goodness, well, I didn't know what that was at the time. So I came from a good school. I'd done well in my school leaving exams. But I didn't know what on earth was going on. And I think that continues to be the case. And that we need to look at what goes on in the universities. And that's where our attention has to be. And we don't just blame the school system.
Thank you, Prof, for the session. Let's give Professor Bowie a hand, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Oh, sorry. Take it easy. Okay. Okay. Let's give another hand, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for the interesting presentation. We appreciate it. And the important questions that came through. Obviously, the issues of equity will always be at the back of our minds, you know, when we talk about the system and how it's performing, and the many issues that seize it and the challenges attendant to the system. So that concludes this session. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Stolle. He will tell us what is going to happen from here onwards, and address us, Julie. I am done with the session. Over to you.
Colleagues, thank you and thank you once again, Prof, and thank you once again, Doc. Colleagues, what we are going to have now, we are going to have our MUT choir, which will come in and energize us a little bit. So just give us just a minute. They will come in now.
Prof. Power, before the choir starts, I've been asked to give you this from the team. I don't know what's in here, but I've just been asked to do the honors and give you this. I'm sure you'll enjoy everything that's in here. Thank you. Oh, they want a picture. Okay, thanks.
Greatest of faithfulness. Good morning. Great is thy Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. Through thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I ever needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter, springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars, and their courses up above, join with all nation in manifold witness. Through thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I ever needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Thank you for the choir for giving us the good items this morning. Colleagues, before we go to the breakaway rooms, there's quite a few important announcements that we need to make. The first announcement is regarding the changing of sessions, just a bit. So those of you who have downloaded the app, the notification will come through the app, and please enable notifications on your app as well. The venue that we are in now is called King Protea. So if you are presenting in King Protea, please stay in this particular venue. And if you are presenting in Cockwood, which is just next door, this side, we would like to request you to also remain in this venue. So the sessions in Cockwood and King all happen in this particular venue. So if you are presenting in Cockwood and if you are presenting in King Protea, please remain in this particular venue. And if you are interested in attending the sessions in Cockwood, please remain in this venue. If you are presenting in Azania, you will then now move to Cockwood, which is just next door, next to the toilet. So if you have a session in Azania, or you are attending a session in Azania, as we go for the breakaway sessions, please move to the next venue. For Alu, everything remains the same. The Alu venue, as you go out here, is the one at the back there. That's where the sessions will be happening in Alu. And I would also request the session chairs to also be in the venues on time to make sure that we conclude the sessions before tea break on time. The other notification that we need to announce is the issue of the cocktail event this evening. Colleagues, if you have indicated that you want to attend the cocktail event this evening, please make sure that you make it on time. We have got some very nice special for you for the cocktail event. So even if you are not interested yet, I would request you to reconsider your decision to attend the cocktail event. Colleagues, let us now go for the breakaway sessions, and the session chairs, I will come and have a word with you shortly. Thank you.